not seeing here, which is in the works, is embedded Power BI. So embedded analytics, that goes bi-directional. It will basically be the whole report being embedded, parts of it being embedded, and the ability for you to drill from one box into the transaction detail. That's stuff we're working on. And it's basically in-memory processing in the background that we are lighting up. Okay. So
when you say, I just want to put out. There's a lot of buzz. There's a lot of buzz on in-memory.
Okay.
Right. Tell us a little bit about in-memory.
So AX7, what we are enabling is SQL Server has fantastic in-memory capabilities. Every month it gets better, and pretty much transparently underneath the covers, we are enabling those in-memory capabilities for the business logic we have. So the data entities, and specifically the aggregate data entities, will be running against an in-memory store on SQL Server to dish out real-time analytics. You don't have latency in the data that you just saw.
Okay.
And that's basically one of the key messages.
Sweet, show us some more.
Okay, so let's switch to a view. I was going to make it a little more exciting. First thing I'd call out is if you see the dashboard here, the dashboard is a different view. I'm the administrator, I control what Dan shows. So I have way more here, information here than what he had to show. So it's a tailored dashboard, okay? So Dan does a fantastic job of teaching. So I thought, how do we genie bottle him up and kind of have him teach the audience how to create a purchase order? Do you guys want to do that? There's Dan Brown, and he's going to teach us how to create a purchase order.
Excellent.
So basically, this is a functionality feature called task guides that allow an end user to walk a business process end to end in a guided fashion. So let's create a purchase order. And this has multiple purposes: testing, user education, things of that sort. It quickly says scroll right. I'm an administrator, and I don't really know what this is. It says continue scrolling right, and it says, okay, open the workspace on procurement. And that's what I did. And okay, what next? Click a new purchase order, and I really know nothing. So it's basically saying, click a new purchase order.
I think I can use this.
With that?
With this.
Okay. Engineers in the room, we need a task guide for this one. Okay. I think we can find an IoT sensor for that and make that happen. So I'm going to Acme Supplies, and it says, it'll add other pieces also here. It has annotation capability. It has the ability to write comments as you're testing the product to say, I don't like this part. So you have a whole bunch of abilities there. So I'm going to click OK there. And let's say what it asks me to do next. It's now asking me to pull the drill down on items and pick the Surface Pro 3, which I was supposed to do, and pick a warehouse from which to distribute it. So, and then it's it.
That's awesome. So what are some scenarios where this could be useful? You like it?
It's fantastic technology to increase productivity of your users, to basically figure out, manage change as a new system comes into play, get users comfortable, use it for testing, use it for localization testing, run it in English, run it in other languages, for an ISV or a partner to say, here's how standard works, here's how my IP works. So there's a whole bunch of capability functionality. It goes into support. You can ship a task guide to Microsoft saying this part doesn't work, how do I get it working? So that technology is being enabled. It's a multi-purpose framework that we are shipping. Okay?
Fantastic. Show us something more.
Okay, so should we customize the vendor project?
Yeah, I think, by the way, this is one of my favorite features. I just love it. But you got to show Visual Studio, and since we talked about customization and upgrade before, I think you got to show some of the changes.
Okay, so Dan Brown as a trainer is done. Let's do Dan Brown as a developer.
Add something to that.
So, add something to render. Okay. When I ask him to add something to render, he doesn't listen. So
that's right. It's usually cost me. I know.
This is the Visual Studio experience for those of you who are used to Morphex. The Morphex experience around, the classic experience is there. And you also have something called a model experience here. So the different models that we ship, the application suite, the ISV models will all show up here. And I'm not going to go through the details of that. I can do a search here. I can say when, table, list, page, there's a ton of metadata, and I only want metadata related to the vendor page. So I can quickly go to that. Okay. I'm going to skip this part, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the vend table form itself, the vendor form as we call it, and there's a preview. So we are enabling a WYSIWYG experience. So if you see this, I'm going to scroll this a little. It's actually built for multi-window. So as a developer, I love both these screens, not the same thing showing on both screens. So what I can do is I can basically click on vendor account, and it will take me to the design pane where vendor account is, or type, and basically go into the type elements, okay? Or vice versa. I can basically go into org group, and it will take me to the org group section here. So you get this interactive experience of working on the web page and working with the designer both ways, okay? The next thing is I've already done some customizations here. I'm going to use this magical keyword that brings up all my customizations, okay? So you just hover over it and it shows you the customizations that you made to the method, okay? And the plus sign here is additive extensions that have been made, so we identify that very quickly. You see this thing in red. The red is the ability for you to resolve conflicts. So you basically are saying there's a conflict between what has been built and what Microsoft has and what you had in the past. So you basically get to pick and resolve. So I'm not going to go through that experience, but basically you get a very rich experience of customization.
So now you've added something to vendor, the definition and all that stuff. What if you actually want to add some vendors?
Okay, let's go through that experience of adding to vendors. Okay. So what he's talking about, let me get out of background mode into regular mode. What Christian is talking about is, you want to bring in new vendors. It's a classic problem of first-time installation data migration, incremental data loads, which is a common reality in a hybrid world where you have disparate heterogeneous systems, but you want single source of truth. So we have built a pretty phenomenal technology here that we are previewing today with you. It's called data management. It's powered again by data entities like we talked about. OData, Azure Integration Services, microservices enabled AX, microservices enabled CRM, which will then communicate. That's basically the base framework itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring certain vendor files in to the system and have that vendor file be shown to you. So let's call it demo. The file type is CSV. I'm going to bring in some vendor groups that are required for this. And these are all drop downs, but just for time's sake, I'm going through the experience of showing you as is. So what happened here was the file has some header information, and based on that header information, we did name matching and built a mapping. So we do name matching and name pattern matching. So if it said vendor name or name, we'll map it to name. If it said vend name, we'll still map it to name. So we basically reduce the amount of work an end user consultant has to do. This was a dev task a couple of years back, and now we basically made it. Just bring the file, we'll recognize it, tweak it a little bit here or there. You can basically highlight this, change it, any which way you want, delete it, and then basically do drag and drop mapping. So let's go back quickly and run this into the system, okay? So it basically shows you that vendor groups are being populated. And I'm basically going to bring in some vendors. Okay? And again, for vendors, there's a map. And it's a little more complex map. It did the mapping automatically to the file as we imported it. Okay? And if you don't like the visual mapping, there's a couple of us geeks who don't like it. You can get the tabular mapping too. We support that also. And now let's run that in the system. So we're going to run the vendors into the system. And then we're going to do side-by-side compares of what we brought in terms of staging, the file itself, and the vendor records themselves. So let's go into the view staging. Basically, we take the representation of file and we load it into a temporary structure, an in-memory hectopin structure in SQL Server. And this is the staging representation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it up in what we call as target. Target is the vendor form itself. Okay. This is the representation of the vendor form. And I'm going to pop this out, just like Dan did, and not to be left behind. Okay. And okay. So you've got these two side by side, the staging data and the target data, for you to validate the data itself. So I can now switch. What I can do now is go record to record. Okay. And you can see this data. Sorry, I clicked on a hyperlink. I shouldn't have. I can go to M11, and it shows M11 on the other side. I can make changes here and run that into the system with a technology called upsert from the staging into production.
All right, I think you could go on for a long time. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me thank This is super